Alrighty, bonjour et bienvenue to our How to Study for French presentation. My name is Mirna Najera Perez, and I am an academic coach for the Learning Center. I am also a graduate student at PSU, and I am fluent in Spanish, English, and French. I've been studying French for about 10 years now, and I've even had the opportunity to live in France for some time, work as an English teaching assistant at a high school in France, and also I studied abroad in Senegal. So I'm very excited to be presenting with our French tutor, George.
Hello, my name is Jorge, and I am the French tutor here at Portland State University and the Learning Center. My major is French, so I'm not quite as fluent as Myrna quite yet, but I do hope to get the opportunity to one day also go study in France and just be able to experience French in its natural habitat, as I like to call it. And I'm also super excited to be giving this presentation because French can be quite difficult to study sometimes. So it's nice to have some tips and tricks.
Alrighty, so before we get started, I just wanted to go over what the Learning Center provides for our PSU students. Of course, on-campus tutoring is not currently happening because of the global pandemic, but that is something that we did offer in the past. In the moment, we are only offering online tutoring as well as online academic coaching sessions. We also offer Roads to Success presentations where we teach students / provide strategies and tips for how to help students be as successful as possible. We offer a college success course, and again, like I've mentioned, we offer academic coaching sessions. Academic coaching and online tutoring are all free, and they're available to all PSU students, whether you're an undergraduate student or a graduate student. Alrighty, so the objectives for today's workshop are essentially to establish the importance of the study cycle in relation to learning French, help you identify specific active learning strategies that can be applied to your French courses. And then also, we hope that you feel prepared and ready to apply these strategies to your own coursework so that you can be as successful as possible for winter 2021 and throughout your time at PSU. So again, today, throughout the workshop, we will be looking at the study cycle closely. We'll actually analyze each of the steps individually. And the reason why we are talking about the study cycle is because this is a highly effective approach to being a successful student. So the first step is to preview. What does this look like in terms of your French courses? Well, what you want to do is to preview the material first. So this could include skimming all the chapters, skimming through the articles and through all of the reading assignments that you get, making sure that you're looking at the titles, the subtitles, any of the bold text, the diagrams, also reviewing the summaries and the chapter objectives before class so that you can sort of develop preliminary questions that you can ask during class. And the reason why you want to make sure that you preview the material is because you want to pre-expose yourself to what you'll be learning. Another way in which you can sort of assess and determine what you'll be learning throughout your French course is by checking your syllabus. Make sure to take a look at your syllabus before class even starts. So right now is week 1. Really do go through the course syllabi that you have and acknowledge when your professor's office hours take place, what are the main subjects / main topics for your French courses, any sort of, big due dates that you might have. Really go through and preview what you'll be going over in your French courses. And you want to make sure that you preview the material because you'll be much better prepared to learn new concepts when they've come up, when you've already been introduced to those concepts. So your brain is sort of pre-exposed to that material, and you'll actually be able to retain that information longer if you pre-expose yourself to the material.
So how exactly can you do preview and preview your material for a French course? A very nice thing to do is to review the vocabulary. So read through the material and try to identify any words you don't understand. You can look up definitions in online services such as Word Reference. And there you can also even do Google Translate for single words, since it's very effective. And just to make sure that you comprehend, at least have an idea what the words mean or what the chapter is about, so you're not as confused when you're talking about it with your professor and classmates. You should note any concept that you might find struggle with, or any concept that you might have struggled with in the past and that you want to get better at, because with French classes, you tend to kind of start, if you start with 101, you start with something very confusing, and then you develop it more as you go in your courses. So we don't want you to, stay behind. So it's very good to just get a nice preview. Um, Look through the PowerPoint notes before the class. A lot of professors tend to post their PowerPoints right before the course. You can just take a look, skim it through quickly, so you have an idea what's coming and why you might want to write notes out. Have your syllabus out to highlight, like Myrna said, any important dates or any important material that you need to focus on. And then just write down questions, because it'll be your best friend but when it comes to having clear up any confusions with your professor. And just not don't be afraid to ask questions that may seem a little weird, because at the end of the day, it's your education and you should be able to step up for yourself and get those questions answered.
Alrighty, step number 2 in the study cycle is to attend. Now, of course, this looks a little different now that we are doing remote learning, but there are ways in which you can show, active participation and presence. So go to class. If your French courses are meeting through Zoom, attend this Zoom lectures. Make sure that you can show presence or active participation by asking questions throughout the lectures, and also by participating in the discussions and activities taking place. Also make sure that you attend office hours and that you email your professors when you have any questions. Feel free to also reach out to your peers and ask them questions. Again, this all shows active engagement and active participation in your French courses. Some helpful tips right now, for remote learning, so that you can be as accountable over your learning, is by turning on your camera and by choosing the speaker view, so that you can stay engaged. When your camera is on, you're conscious of your presence, you're conscious of your learning. Whereas if you turn your camera off or you're not connected, you can easily get distracted. So rather than setting yourself up for failure, you might as well set up yourself for success by being as active, in your learning as you can be. You might also consider using the chat or the raise hand functions to ask questions. You can also unmute yourself and ask your professor any questions that you might have, and also attend in other ways. If your class is meeting through D2L, or your professor's posting stuff through D2L, go over and acknowledge any of the announcements he's making or they're making. If your classmates make any posts through D2L, respond to your classmates, email your professor, meet with Jorge, meet with any of the French tutors that might be working through the Learning Center, or that might be offered through the language department. Just take control over your own learning. Learning is within your power. So be as active in your attendance as you can. And if, by any chance you cannot attend a Zoom lecture, let your professor know. Email them in advance and let them know why you couldn't attend, and ask if, they could provide any of the worksheets or any sort of material that you missed. Again, this will show that you are being proactive and that you are taking action over your own learning. So this is important because it is hard to stay engaged over Zoom. Zoom exhaustion is a thing, but actively engaging with the material will actually help you better understand the material, and it will help you retain that information.
All right, so what does attending look like specifically for our French class? A little more in depth is, asking questions because there's a chance that someone else also has the same question and they're also just as afraid as you to ask. And I have been in that position, right? Where like I don't want to ask a question, but then someone else asks the same question and suddenly my own, concerns are clarified. So it's really good to like try to learn to ask those questions yourself so you can be ahead for your own learning. Taking notes is very important. I find that noting down any specific material that your professor mentions, any conjugations, any exceptions on verbs, any little thing that it's important to remember and that may be easily forgotten should be taken care of by taking notes. Should attend study sessions. Usually, there's times where professors offer to have an extra class, like on a weekend, just to study before an exam or just to talk with other students, because a good way to attend in a French class is to speak with others, right? Whenever you have time to make conversation in French, it's golden time because you're not gonna get that chance otherwise, unless you're in like a French group or like you find a third party way of like talking to someone in French, or someone who talks in French. You should take advantage of um, conversation time as much as possible. Attending the professor's office hours any chance you can, or any questions you have, and also you can meet with me and I can help you flesh any problems out, or just in general help you comprehend a little more or explain anything, or offer strategies to better understand the material.
Alrighty. You also want to make sure to review. So try to review the material within 24 hours of learning it. You want to make sure you reread and that you rework your notes as necessary. Also identify any gaps in comprehension, any gaps in your notes, any gaps in what it is you're not understanding or what it is that you're not quite comprehending. You want to also make note of any lingering questions that you might have. Reviewing is really important because that's really where you're able to assess how you are doing in the course and how you can improve. Where are the areas for growth? Also consider your learning style when you're reviewing. Keep in mind how you're taking notes and what system is working best for you. How are you successfully reviewing French? And how can you successfully or how can you improve the way in which you are learning French? Again, learning a language remotely is very difficult. So props to you for taking French in the first place in this remote learning method. But again, now that you are in a French course, really take ownership of that and take control of your own learning. The reason why reviewing is important is because studies show that reviewing your notes within a few hours after class actually considerably increases your retention and your understanding of the material. So again, if you're going to take notes, what's the point of taking notes if you're not going to review them, right? Actually make a use out of the notes that you are taking and actively be engaged with the material as best you can. This is how you're really going to improve a language. When it comes to learning a language, there is always room for growth. There is always room for improvement. Review your pronunciation. Review, how successfully you are understanding the grammar of a language. Review the spelling of your words. Review how well you're understanding the gender of words. Anything like that. Just be mindful and be aware of how you can improve. Now, here is a great visual for why you want to review material. This is a graph of the typical forgetting curve for newly learned information. As you can see, within just the first day of being exposed to newly learned information, you have lost 20%. So you only retain 80% within that day of learning something. However, the more you review the material, the more you are, actively working with the material you are learning, the more you will retain that information. I would also argue that the more substance you are retaining. So, it will really work to your advantage to review what you're learning. Another thing that you might want to keep in mind is in order to successfully review, in order to be a successful student, how do you learn best? Are you a visual learner? Are you more so an auditory learner? how do you prefer to learn? Do you need to connect images and symbols to vocabulary terms, or do you need to transcribe French text into English or vice versa? Or do you need to talk out loud and read out loud as you are, working in your study sessions? Or do you need to be physically active with the material? Do you know, physically act out words or anything like that? Just keep in mind of how you've learned best in the past and apply that to your French courses. There is a learning style assessment test that you can access through the Learning Center website. You feel free to take that assessment so that you can sort of, figure out how you learn best. Another thing that you want to acknowledge is how you take notes and whether your note-taking strategies are effective in terms of reviewing the material. Do you prefer Cornell notes? Do you prefer sort of key terms and then sort of a quick little definition with a summary at the end? Or do you prefer bullet point note style? Or, are you more of a visual learner? So do you need, sort of a map that connects to central themes? Again, figure out what works best for you and apply that to your French courses so that you can learn French as best as you can.
Again, so what does this look like in French? You should write down explanations and examples given to you by your professors. There's a big chance that if your professor gives you a specific example describing a piece of grammar or a word or any concept in general, they are using that example because it's important and it makes it easier to comprehend. So you should write those down and try to comprehend them as best as possible. Another great tip is to write down the gender of words as well as its category within the syntax and the grammar of French. So for example, we have the word le monde, which is, and then after that, you can write down in brackets NM, and then the NM would stand for, the N is for a noun, and the M is because the word is masculine. So this way you know what type of word it is and also what the gender of that word is, because in a language such as French, it's very important to keep track of the gender of your words so you don't make a common mistake that, even though it may be harmless, let's say in a conversation, as you learn, it may become a habit to name this word a different gender, and it may sound silly or it may cause you to lose points in an exam. So it's important to write down the word with its gender, and also always writing down the words with its article. So like it's le monde, not just monde, because even though you can write world in English, you know that it's the world, but in French you have to know that it's le, which is masculine. Another thing is to review pronunciations. A good way is to, if you have time to, learn the phonetic alphabet and transcribe the words in French and try to pronounce them that way, or go to YouTube and try to hear somebody pronounce the words. And that way it helps you understand how you're pronouncing it, and also paying attention to how other people pronounce the words, like the professors. They've been speaking French for a while, so their pronunciation might be helpful to follow, but also keeping in mind that pronunciation may vary depending on the region of France you're in, or the country where you're in. But also overall there's I guess a more correct way of pronouncing things, and there's a incorrect way. So you have to figure out what the best way is. And also just prioritize the thing you don't know. Take notes on the concept you struggle with and try to talk them out with your professor.
And of course, you want to study. So try to make any passive study strategies into active ones. This could look like repeating vocabulary terms, really working on the pronunciation, taking practice tests. Don't just write, terms down, actually quiz yourself and see how well you understand that term. Use any of the provided study guides that your professors might give you, or also make your own. Again, adjust it to how you learn best. Really modify so that it meets your learning style. And, because we're in a pandemic, it can be overwhelming and it could be very lonely to be doing this all on your own. So feel free to connect with your classmates and see if, 2 to 3 or 1 or 2 people want to work with you, and create sort of a study group with them, and check in with your professor during their office hours, at least once a term. Check in with Jorge, meet with a tutor, just check in with someone so that you can check how well you are progressing in the French course. Studying is really important, because exams are more so focused on output. So it's important that you practice processing information in that way. Working with others can also help clear up any confusion that you might have. And also it provides a little bit of comfort to connect with someone, with anyone, during these times that it could feel really lonely being at home. So you heard me go over passive study strategies and active study strategies. So, both work, do implement both, but try to be as active as you can in your learning throughout your learning sessions and throughout your learning process, because active study strategies are actually proven to be far more effective when it comes to retaining the information. Passive study strategies include reading, listening to a lecture, watching videos, stuff like that. They're more so focused on input. So ways in which you can make these passive study strategies into active study strategies is by, rather than just reading, read the text out loud, and keep in mind the what the text is connotes, and what it's trying to invoke. Question and be critical with the reading material. Keep in mind any opinions you might have. Do you agree or do you disagree with the author? Why or why not? Related to a current event. For example, if the reading material is talking about the healthcare, the way that the health industry works in France, think about how that connects, like compare it to how it works in the US, something like that. Just be working actively with what you're learning. If you are listening to a lecture, if you're attending a Zoom class, don't just, sit there mindlessly. Actually engage, again, by keeping your camera on and by asking questions throughout the lecture. And if you're watching a video, again, think critically about what you're watching, and come up with questions that you might have. Other active study strategies include taking practice tests. I go over this a lot. When it comes to a language, try to make it as fun as you can. Use Quizlet, use Kahoot, use language apps, take practice tests online. There's a lot of information on the internet that you can have access to for free. So find things that work for you. You also want to create note cards and quiz yourself with those little note cards, or study with a friend or a tutor.
So like Myrna said, you really want to practice the material that you're learning on your own, because at the end of the day, the professor is going to give you the material, but what you do with that material, it's really what's going to build the foundation and in general, your understanding of French in this case. So a good way to do that is to use words in context. You can write out sentences using the new words that you just learned, and that'll really help you understand the word on how it's used and what it means. And your brain is always going to come back to that sentence and be like, oh, I used this word in this way, so that means that I can use it in this other ways, and because I used it in this context, it must mean this. So a really good important thing to do. A good way to study is also study in intervals and sections. That try not to overwhelm yourself with vocabulary, especially in the first few years of French. You're bombarded with 30 plus words and verbs per chapter. So try to study them in sections and try to not, try to do everything the day before the quiz or the exam, because it's not going to be the most effective. And you really want to learn to understand. You don't, as we're here to pass our classes and to graduate, but the best education is the education that you do for yourself and not necessarily just to pass an exam. And if available, you can review lectures, which through Zoom, I think most professors are recording their lectures and they're available for you. So if that's an opportunity, you should take advantage of that. Also looking at book material is very important, and reading in French is a good way to once again you see the words being used in context and to learn new words and expand your vocabulary.
And finally, you want to assess. So periodically check in with yourself and determine what is working for you and what is not working for you. Also think of ways in which you can change or improve the way in which you are learning. And keep in mind of any information that you are not quite understanding. If you're really struggling with something in the French courses, keep in mind of, what it is that you've missed points on in terms of your tests and your quizzes, so that, you can use that as an opportunity to grow, to improve. Also, organize your study time. Reflect on your system on the system that you have down, and determine how well you are managing yourself. And consider structuring your study sessions a little differently if the way you're learning right now is not working. We'll actually go over some ways in which you can structure your study sessions in just a minute. Assessing is really important because by checking in with ourselves, we're able to recognize again what our strength areas are and what our growth areas are. And there's always room for improvement when it comes to a language. Remember why you fell in love with French in the first place, and assess how you can be a better French learner as you keep in mind why you picked that language up in the first place. Also, staying organized is very, very effective, and it's a great way to not be as overwhelmed or as stressed, because it'll keep you on track, so that you can achieve your goal, whether that be to move to France one day and speak fluent colloquial French, or whatever it may be. Just keep in mind of how you can be improving every day.
So just make sure to stay consistent, because consistency is really important when it comes to assessing how you're learning French. Like if you've been trying to study strategy and you haven't learned anything, maybe it's time to change that study strategy and try to make sure that you're learning at a consistent rate. You should study with intention. Study to, like I said, to try to meet your goal and try to assess, like, have I learned the words that I wanted to learn this week? Like, yeah, you might have learned 10 new words this week, but do you really know how to use them in a conversation? Because at the end of the day, if you don't necessarily know how to utilize the content, then you're not really learning how to use French. You're just learning what French is. And I feel like there's a big difference between those two. And you need to track what you feel confident on after studying. So make sure be like, I feel confident in this term and in this grammar, so I'm gonna move on and I'm gonna go study something else. And just like I said, assess whether the method is working, and just referencing your quizzes and exams to determine how much you have improved or what you still need to improve on.
Alrighty, so ways in which you can successfully structure your study sessions include some of these steps that I'll go over. So the first thing that you want to consider is setting a goal. The first thing you should do is to set a goal and take about 1 to 2 minutes to create that goal. And I encourage you to write it down in your notes as well. So let's say that you are struggling with passé composé, right? So maybe your goal is to review passé composé and see how effectively you can write in the past tense. So that could be a goal that you have set. Again, when writing a goal, try to make sure that it's more so a process goal rather than an outcome goal. So process goal is more so an action step of how you can achieve that outcome goal. If the outcome goal is to earn an A in your French course, then the action step or the process goal might be to successfully master passé composé. Then what you want to do is you want to study with intention, study with focus. dedicate 30 to 50 minutes of concentrated time and really, focused energy on what it is that you are doing. Incorporate other resources as you want. Just make sure that at the end of the day, you are addressing that goal that you have. You can use tools such as YouTube or language apps, or online dictionaries, anything like that, anything that will help you be as successful as possible, and be creative. Just switch it up if you need to a little. Again, just make sure that you are studying with intention. And then take about 10 to 15 minutes after your 30 to 50 dedicated time to take a break and reward yourself for the progress that you've made. Take a walk, eat your favorite French snack, your croissant or your baguette or whatever, and grab a cafe au lait or whatever, and just really treat yourself for having successfully studied. I would encourage that you take a break from the screen. So rather than watching TV as a reward, go outside, take a walk, just go get a breath of fresh air. English is not my first language, as you can tell. Just do anything to sort of really reward yourself for what it is for how effectively you've been studying. Rewarding yourself is also sort of a great way to remotivate yourself to achieve that outcome goal that you have. You also want to take the last 5 minutes to go over what you just learned, and make sure to acknowledge whether you've met your goal. So did you accomplish what you were hoping to accomplish, and why or why not? Did you study effectively for 30 to 50 minutes, or were you distracted looking at your phone? Be honest with yourself. Really take the moment to think about how your study session went and where you could improve.
All right, so once again, this looks like using flashcards to see if you remember the definitions, writing the word in one side and the definition on the other. And you can also add any hints that you want to give yourself. You can also add to see if you can guess the gender of the word without, the pronoun, or do these little things that really help you understand the material more. Rereading the text is very important because on your first read, you're most likely going to be confused about what the words mean. So you're going to look them up, and that's going to take away from actually understanding what the content is. So rereading that material is going to be really important to really comprehend and better understand the content in general. You should review your notes that you took during class or rewatch the sim classes, and you should set time aside to go do that and really see if there's anything you missed in the material, or if there's anything in your notes that you can look over a little more. And you should quiz yourself on the vocabulary, on the grammar, on anything that you think you need to be challenged on.
So that concludes our workshop. Thank you for attending. We essentially discussed the study cycle, and we looked at each step individually to make sure that you have a clear understanding of how you can implement these into your study habits so that you can improve as a French learner. If you have any questions or you need any more help, feel free to meet with an academic coach or a tutor. The Learning Center offers a lot of assistance. We provide a lot of helpful tips in terms of helping you manage yourself, helping you develop effective study strategies, and good motivation tips as well. And you can find our information at the Learning Center website. And if you want to book an appointment with me or any other academic coach, you can find my You Can Book Me link by going into the coach's bios on the Learning Center website. And if you want to meet with Jorge, feel free to download the Penji app and make an appointment with Jorge. So if you have any questions, also feel free to reach out to me. My email is mnajera2@pdx.edu. That is mnajera2@pdx.edu.